Liverpool, late 20th century. From the slums of Toxteth rose a figure who became Interpol's nightmare and a legend in criminal folklore. Curtis "Cocky" Warren, a man without a face, a drug lord without flaws, whose shadow stretched across Europe from Rotterdam to Jersey. He built an empire in silence, destroyed lives by the millions, and vanished before the gunshot rang out. This is the story of Britain's most elusive criminal. Curtis Warren was born on May 31, 1963 in Toxteth, one of the most disadvantaged and crime-ridden neighborhoods of Liverpool. He was the youngest of 3 children in a family headed by a seaman and a homemaker. At the time, Toxteth was a place where crime and poverty dictated the rules. Children there learned to survive long before they learned to read. The streets were their first school, and respect was a currency that had to be earned. From an early age, Curtis displayed wit and determination. He quickly realized that, in Toxteth, being law-abiding didn't guarantee safety or success. His early years were spent among street gangs, teen fights, and petty thefts. At just 12 years old, he first came to the attention of police. At the time, it seemed like a harmless prank, stealing sweets from a shop. But for Warren, it was the first step on a path he would follow far. As a teenager, he already knew how thieves, carjackers, and drug dealers operated. He watched, learned, absorbed, and acted more cautiously and wisely than his peers. He had a distinctive trait: not just getting involved in conflicts, but finding ways to profit from them. Because of this, he became a respected figure among his peers before even turning 18. After school, he briefly worked as a bouncer in a nightclub, a venue that, in the 1980s, served as a hub for connections with the criminal underworld. It was there that he first made contact with drug dealers, formed relationships, and observed how people could become rich, fast, by bypassing legal routes. That experience became the springboard from which he would soon leap into full-fledged criminal enterprise. And before we begin, please support my channel. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay active. It will help a lot. Thank you. The early 1980s marked a turning point for Curtis Warren. By then, he had established a solid reputation on the streets of Liverpool, and more importantly, had ambitions that far exceeded the scope of local street business. He quickly realized that the drug market offered far more money than car thefts or robberies. Heroin was becoming more available, and demand remained high. Warren wasn't just chasing profit, he was building a system. He started small, buying batches from local dealers and reselling at a higher price. But what set him apart was not only his business acumen, but also his discipline. He kept records, calculated risk, avoided ostentatious displays of wealth. This attracted other players on the scene. Warren began forming his own network, relying on hand-picked individuals. He built the structure like a business, not a street gang. His breakthrough came with a trip to the Netherlands, where he established ties with South American cartel representatives operating through the port of Rotterdam. There he discovered the concept of container importation, drug shipments hidden among legitimate cargo. This insight allowed him to level up. He now managed supply lines from abroad, bypassing British middlemen. In Liverpool, Cocky, a nickname earned for his cocaine focus, quickly became a name spoken in whispers. He controlled not only supply routes but also distribution hubs and enforced his own rules on the streets. People feared him but respected him. He didn't yell or threaten unnecessarily, always acting coldly and strategically. Killings and retributions occurred, but only as a last resort. Police already knew his name, but they had no evidence. He left no trails, no documents, no calls, no financial transactions. Everything operated on trust, cash, and coded words. In those years, he became the embodiment of a new kind of criminal leader: secretive, calculating, strategic. By the mid-1990s, Curtis Warren had become one of the most powerful drug traffickers in Western Europe. His criminal network spanned Liverpool, Manchester, London, Amsterdam, Brussels, and even reached as far as Venezuela and Colombia. This was no street gang. It was a transnational organization with a clear hierarchy, logistics system, financial infrastructure, and international contacts. Cocaine shipments arrived directly from South America, most often through the port of Rotterdam, one of the largest in Europe. Tons of drugs were hidden under the guise of fruit shipments, equipment, or construction materials. From there, the product moved to distribution centers controlled by Warren's carefully selected and well-paid people. He paid generously but demanded absolute loyalty. Financial flows were masked through offshore accounts, real estate investments, and front companies. According to investigators, the cartel's monthly turnover reached tens of millions of pounds. Warren invested in car dealerships, bars, hotels, and also used bank accounts in Panama and Luxembourg. Despite the scale, he remained astonishingly cautious. No expensive watches, no flashy cars, no public appearances. In Britain's criminal underworld, he became almost mythical. The media called him the Invisible Man and the Boss Without a Face. Even rivals avoided conflict with him. He preferred partnership over war, but never forgave betrayal. Several high-profile disappearances in northern England were attributed to his operation, though nothing was ever proven. By 1996, Warren ranked among Europe's 10 most wanted criminals. His fortune was estimated between 200 and 300 million pounds. Law enforcement across multiple countries had one goal: dismantle his empire. Despite dozens of operations and surveillance efforts, he remained free, expanding his control. Cocky seemed untouchable, but his power and growing confidence began to work against him. He started making mistakes, and intelligence units were already picking up signs. Cracks were forming in the system he had spent a decade building. Despite the vast scale of his criminal empire, Curtis Warren remained out of reach of law enforcement for nearly 2 decades. His legendary caution, paranoia, and structural discipline became a model for drug syndicates across Europe. He never used phones, rarely met anyone in person, and regularly changed residences. He issued instructions through trusted individuals, using pre-agreed phrases and codes. Agents had to build their investigations piece by piece. Warren wasn't just a drug dealer, he created a model in which the identity of the leader vanished behind layers of intermediaries and shell companies. His name didn't appear in bank records, surveillance footage, or documents. He existed like a shadow, directing millions of pounds from the grey zone. In 1993, Scotland Yard, Interpol, and Dutch police launched a joint operation to wiretap Warren's Dutch cell. Investigators gathered hundreds of hours of recorded conversations between operation participants, tracking routes, checking containers. Their goal wasn't just to intercept a shipment. They aimed to arrest Cocky himself. From the moment the ship docked, hidden cameras, drones, and undercover agents monitored every move. When unloading began, police struck swiftly. Dozens were arrested, tons of cocaine seized, and locations raided across the Netherlands. But Warren evaded arrest, at least for now. He remained the Invisible Man. Even when his name came up, it was veiled. The guy from Liverpool, the big man, K. No direct evidence tied him to the drugs. One former soccer agent later said, "He was someone you couldn't catch red-handed. He thought 2 moves ahead, even with surveillance. We knew it was him, but we couldn't prove it." Still, cracks began to form in this covert war. Warren started trusting his European partners more, and this zone of risk proved fatal. At some point, he overestimated his reach by launching a deal larger than anything he'd attempted before. It involved multiple countries, tons of cocaine, and millions in cash. That deal became the turning point in the story of Liverpool's drug baron. By the fall of 1996, Curtis Warren was orchestrating the largest deal of his career. Over a ton of cocaine, valued at around £80 million, was set to arrive in Europe from Venezuela through the port of Rotterdam. The operation involved forged documents, fake cargo, rerouted shipping paths, and dozens of couriers. Warren was confident. Everything was under control. What he didn't know was that Dutch police, supported by British intelligence, had been wiretapping his associates for months. Investigators had compiled a library of recorded conversations, monitored routes, and inspected containers. Their mission was not just to intercept the shipment, they wanted to arrest Cocky himself. As the vessel docked, hidden cameras, drones, and undercover officers tracked every move. When unloading began, police acted immediately. Dozens of arrests, massive seizures of cocaine, and coordinated raids across the Netherlands. Among those captured was Curtis Warren. His arrest in Rotterdam sent shockwaves. Someone who had eluded capture for nearly 20 years was now in custody. He tried to remain composed, denying all involvement and claiming to be in the country for personal reasons. But wiretaps, surveillance logs, and financial records formed a heavy case against him. The trial began in 1997. Warren was charged with organizing an international drug conspiracy. His closest associates were also on the stand. The prosecution presented dozens of audio recordings discussing the cocaine shipment, payments, and logistics. A key piece of evidence was Warren's coordination of the deal using coded language and couriers whose movements had been tracked. In 1998, Curtis Warren was found guilty and sentenced to 12 years in prison. It was his first major defeat, his first time behind bars in a career defined by evasion. He was sent to a high-security Dutch prison where he was expected to spend over a decade. Yet even in isolation, Warren refused to relinquish power. Behind prison walls, he remained an influential figure, keeping the attention of European law enforcement firmly fixed on him. Imprisonment in the Dutch facility. New Vossenveld marked a new chapter in Curtis Warren's life. He had lost his freedom, but not his influence. Even behind thick walls, he maintained control over parts of his network. According to law enforcement, he continued issuing directives through lawyers, coded letters, and messages relayed by other inmates. In 2001, Warren became the subject of another case. He was accused of assaulting another prisoner, rumored to be linked to a dispute over drug distribution inside the prison. Despite these charges, his status among inmates remained untouchable. He reportedly controlled not just drugs, but also illegal trade in mobile phones, alcohol, and other contraband. Investigators in Britain and the Netherlands continued monitoring his contacts. At the same time, authorities began targeting his finances, freezing and seizing assets linked to Warren or his trusted associates. Homes, cars, and bank accounts were confiscated. One investigator remarked, "We knew that while he was inside, his network was vulnerable. This was our chance to dismantle it." But Warren adapted. He spent time in the prison library, studied legal texts, and even helped other inmates with appeals. According to prison staff, he remained polite, composed, and avoided direct confrontations. His strategic thinking extended into the prison system. In 2005, after 8 years in custody, he was released. But his freedom did not mean a clean slate. British intelligence was waiting for him, preparing for the next round. Warren didn't return to Liverpool. Instead, he settled on the island of Jersey, a quiet and wealthy offshore territory where he hoped to re-establish himself away from prying eyes. But this decision would prove to be a fatal mistake. When Curtis Warren was released from prison in 2005, he chose not to return to Liverpool, but instead relocated to Jersey, a British offshore jurisdiction known for its secrecy and financial infrastructure. He presented himself as an investor interested in real estate, but law enforcement was already watching closely. His real goal, authorities believed, was to resume laundering the millions he had accumulated over decades of drug trafficking. British intelligence, in coordination with Jersey officials, launched a major surveillance operation codenamed Operation Koala. Their aim wasn't just to monitor Warren, but to document every move: his contacts, financial transfers, meetings, phone calls, and travel. Hidden cameras, wiretaps, text intercepts, and undercover agents were deployed. The turning point came when investigators intercepted a series of conversations between Warren and his associates discussing the transport of £1 million in cash from mainland Britain to the island. The money was allegedly intended for business investments, but law enforcement believed it was part of a laundering scheme. In one recorded call from September 3, 2007, Warren discussed the cash transfer, mentioning transport details, routes, and amounts. On October 6, 2007, Jersey police arrested Warren and 5 associates. Raids uncovered documents, maps, mobile phones, instructions, and large sums of cash. Charges included conspiracy to launder criminal proceeds and attempting to move drug-linked funds. The trial on Jersey lasted nearly a year. Warren claimed the money was from legitimate investments and personal savings. But intercepted calls, witness testimony, and financial records told a different story. In 2009, he was convicted and sentenced to 13 years in prison. Prosecutors argued that Warren was trying to re-establish control over his old network. Once again, he was behind bars. Authorities then launched an asset recovery process. In 2013, Jersey's royal court ordered him to pay £198 million or face extended time in prison. Warren refused, stating he had no access to such funds. This triggered an international search for his assets from Panama to Luxembourg. He became a symbol of a drug boss who could be caged but not easily dismantled. The story of Curtis "Cocky" Warren remains one of the most remarkable in Britain's criminal history. He was more than a drug dealer. He was the symbol of an era when criminal intelligence could build transnational empires while staying in the shadows. His methods became case studies for both criminals and the law enforcement agencies pursuing them. Warren's influence is still felt, from street gangs in Liverpool to international anti-drug task forces. Years of battling his network forced UK and European authorities to rethink surveillance, wiretapping protocols, and financial crime strategies. His prosecutions prompted reforms in money laundering laws, enhanced international cooperation, and expanded police powers in cross-border investigations. Even behind bars, Warren remains a figure who inspires fear, respect, and analysis. His name circulates among criminals as a legend and among investigators as one of their most challenging targets. In 2023, he was released under supervision, still under the close watch of security services. Whether he will return to his old operations is unknown, but his name continues to carry weight. Warren's legacy is the story of a man who became a multimillionaire not through luck, but through a methodical, strategic approach to crime. It is also a cautionary tale. Even the most complex criminal systems eventually falter. For law enforcement, his saga is a reminder of the need for persistence, patience, and international collaboration. For street-level criminals, he is a myth that became real, one not erased by decades of incarceration.